Before the skyscrapers pierced the sky, before the bustling streets and the towering buildings that define the modern skyline, before the L train rumbled overhead, carrying countless passengers through the heart of the city, the land where Chicago now stands pulsed with a different rhythm. It was a rhythm dictated by nature, by the changing seasons, and by the lives of those who first called this place home. This was a place the indigenous people called Chicago, a name whispered on the wind, a name that carried with it the essence of the land, a name that spoke of wild onions and fertile ground. The name itself was a testament to the abundance and richness of the area, a place where life thrived in harmony with nature. It was a place of life, where the rivers teemed with fish and the fields yielded bountiful harvests, a place of connection to the earth and to the spirits that dwelled within it. The indigenous people held ceremonies and rituals that honored the land and its many gifts, fostering a deep spiritual bond with their surroundings. For centuries, Native American tribes thrived in this region, their lives interwoven with the ebb and flow of the seasons. They lived in harmony with the natural world, understanding its cycles and respecting its power. The land provided sustenance, the rivers offered passage, and the forests whispered ancient secrets. Each season brought its own challenges and rewards, and the people adapted, their lives a testament to resilience and ingenuity. The forests, dense and teeming with life, were both a source of sustenance and a place of mystery. They whispered ancient secrets to those who listened, secrets that had been passed down through generations. It was a world of balance, where every element played its part in the grand tapestry of life. The people understood this balance and lived in a way that maintained it, ensuring that the land could continue to provide for future generations. A world on the brink of irreversible change. The story of Chicago, the story we rarely hear, begins long before the arrival of European explorers. It is a story that is deeply rooted in the land itself, a story that has been etched into the very fabric of this place. It is a story of the original inhabitants who lived in harmony with nature. These were the people who understood the language of the wind and the wisdom whispered by the rustling leaves. It's a story etched in the memory of the land itself, a story of the original inhabitants who lived in harmony with nature. They were the stewards of this land, their lives deeply entwined with the natural world. These were the people who understood the language of the wind and the wisdom whispered by the rustling leaves. They knew the land intimately, every hill and valley, every river and forest. They understood the delicate balance that existed and worked to maintain it, ensuring that the land could continue to provide for future generations. Their story, often obscured by the dominant narrative, is essential to understanding the true soul of Chicago. It is a story of resilience, of adaptation, and of a deep, abiding connection to the land. Their story, often obscured by the dominant narrative, is essential to understanding the true soul of Chicago. It is a story that deserves to be told. A story that is as much a part of Chicago's history as the skyscrapers and the L train. The Potawatomi, the Miami, the Sauk, the Fox, the Ho-Chunk, the Ottawa. These were just a few of the sovereign nations who called the Chicagou region home. For centuries, these tribes thrived in the area, each contributing to a rich and diverse cultural landscape. They were not a monolith, but a tapestry of cultures, each with their own unique traditions, languages, and beliefs. Their societies were complex and multifaceted, with intricate social structures and deep spiritual connections to the land. They fished in the bountiful waters of Lake Michigan, relying on the lake's rich resources to sustain their communities. Fishing was not just a means of survival, but a cultural practice, with techniques and knowledge passed down through generations. They hunted in the surrounding forests, where the dense woodlands provided game and materials for tools and clothing. Hunting was a skill honed over lifetimes, a practice that required deep understanding of the natural world and respect for the animals they pursued. And they cultivated crops like corn, beans, and squash, known as the Three Sisters. These crops were grown together in a symbiotic relationship, each plant supporting the others. This method of farming was both sustainable and efficient, reflecting a profound knowledge of agriculture. Their lives were governed by the rhythms of the natural world, and their connection to the land ran deep. Every aspect of their existence was intertwined with the environment, from their spiritual beliefs to their daily activities. These tribes were not passive inhabitants of the land. They were skilled diplomats, fierce warriors, and astute traders. They engaged in complex political and social networks, negotiating alliances and rivalries with other tribes. They navigated complex alliances and rivalries, forging relationships with other tribes and, eventually, with the European newcomers. These interactions were often fraught with tension but also opportunities for trade and cultural exchange. But the arrival of European settlers marked a turning point, a shift in the balance of power that would have devastating consequences for the indigenous people of the region. The settlers brought with them new technologies, diseases, and a relentless drive for expansion. The settlers, driven by a hunger for land and resources, saw the vast wilderness as theirs for the taking, a blank canvas upon which to impose their own vision. They disregarded the existing inhabitants and their deep-rooted connections to the land, leading to conflicts and displacement. The indigenous tribes faced forced relocations, broken treaties, and violent confrontations. Their lands were seized, their communities disrupted, and their ways of life irrevocably altered. The impact of these actions is still felt today, as many Native American communities continue to struggle with the legacy of displacement and marginalization. Despite these challenges, Native American communities have shown remarkable resilience. They continue to preserve their cultures, languages, and traditions, passing them on to future generations. Their stories are a testament to their enduring strength and the rich heritage that remains an integral part of the American landscape. Today, efforts are being made to recognize and honor the contributions of these tribes, to acknowledge the injustices they have faced, and to support their ongoing efforts to reclaim their heritage and rights. The story of the Potawatomi, the Miami, the Sauk, the Fox, the Ho-Chunk, the Ottawa, and many others is a vital part of our collective history, one that must be remembered and respected. The year 1795 saw the signing of the Treaty of Greenville. This treaty was a pivotal moment in the history of Native American tribes in the Great Lakes region. It was intended to bring peace between the United States and various Native American tribes after years of conflict. However, the treaty also marked the beginning of a series of land cessions that would have devastating consequences for the indigenous peoples of the region. This agreement, while ostensibly a treaty of peace, marked the beginning of a long and painful era of land cessions for the tribes of the Chicagou region. The Native American tribes, who had lived on these lands for generations, were now being forced to give up their territories. The treaty was just the first of many that would systematically strip them of their land and resources. The treaty forced them to relinquish vast tracts of land, pushing them further and further away from their ancestral homes. The land that had been the foundation of their culture, their livelihood, and their identity was now being taken from them. The loss of land meant the loss of their way of life, their traditions, and their connection to their ancestors. The insatiable hunger for land continued to grow, and with it, the pressure on the Native American tribes intensified. Settlers were constantly pushing westward, driven by the promise of new opportunities and the belief in manifest destiny. This relentless expansion left little room for the Native American tribes, who were seen as obstacles to progress and development. The year 1833 saw the signing of the Treaty of Chicago, a document that would seal the fate of the remaining tribes in the region. This treaty was one of the most significant and controversial agreements in the history of Native American land cessions. It was signed under immense pressure and often through coercion, with many Native American leaders feeling they had no choice but to agree. This treaty, often signed under duress and shrouded in controversy, forced the Potawatomi, Ottawa, and Chippewa to cede millions of acres of land in Illinois, Indiana, and Michigan in exchange for a fraction of its worth and the promise of new territory west of the Mississippi River. The promises made to the tribes were rarely kept, and the new lands they were given were often unsuitable for their way of life. This forced removal, a tragic echo of the Trail of Tears that devastated Native American tribes in the southeastern United States, ripped families from their homes and severed their connection to their ancestral lands. The journey to the new territories was fraught with hardship and suffering. Many did not survive the journey, and those who did found themselves in unfamiliar and often inhospitable lands. The Trail of Tears in Illinois is a somber reminder of the resilience and strength of the Native American tribes, who endured unimaginable hardships and yet continued to fight for their rights and their heritage. As the indigenous people of Chicago were being driven from their lands, a new city was rising on the shores of Lake Michigan. Incorporated in 1837, Chicago quickly transformed from a humble trading post into a bustling metropolis. The city's strategic location at the crossroads of the Great Lakes and the Mississippi River made it a hub for commerce and transportation. Waves of immigrants, drawn by the promise of opportunity, flooded into the city, eager to build new lives. But Chicago's rapid growth came at a cost. The very land on which the city was built was land that had been taken, often forcibly, from its original inhabitants. The influx of new arrivals further marginalized the indigenous population, pushing them to the fringes of society. As Chicago prospered, the story of its founding, the story of displacement and broken promises, faded into the background. The city's gleaming facade obscured the darker chapters of its past. In the 1960s, Chicago's demographics saw significant shifts, including a growing black population and a decline in overall population, with many neighborhoods becoming majority black due to factors like blockbusting and white flight. Chicago is often referred to as a Mecca or Black Mecca, due to its historical significance as a destination for African Americans during the Great Migration, becoming a center for black culture, business, and community. During the Great Migration, roughly 1916 to 1970, millions of African Americans moved from the Jim Crow South to northern cities seeking better opportunities, and Chicago became a major destination. Chicago's South Side, particularly the Bronzeville neighborhood, became known as the Black Metropolis or Black Belt, due to the concentration of black residents, businesses, and cultural institutions. Chicago attracted black-owned businesses, cultural institutions, and a thriving black community, solidifying its reputation as a Mecca for African Americans. The black population in Chicago increased significantly, with many neighborhoods becoming majority black. White residents began moving to the suburbs, contributing to the decline in the city's overall population and the racial shift within neighborhoods. The Belmont, Cragin, Hermosa, Avondale, and Logan Square neighborhoods were majority Latino. In the 1960s, Chicago was still predominantly white, but the black population was growing rapidly. By 1960, 14 of Chicago's neighborhoods were majority black, including North Lawndale, which became more than 90% black. The Black Panther Party of Chicago emerged on the city's west side in the autumn of 1968. As one of 45 Black Panther chapters around the country, the Illinois chapter gained over 300 new members within 4 months of its founding because many young black Chicagoans identified with the Panthers' militant denunciations of racism, capitalism, and police brutality. By the middle of 1969, the Chicago Panthers' neighborhood roots and class-based critiques of American political economy helped them form a radical partnership with Latino and white Chicagoans called the Rainbow Coalition. This coalition targeted Chicago's structural inequalities by placing programs like free breakfast and free legal consultation at the service of the city's disadvantaged populations. The militant image and rhetoric that attracted so many radical Chicagoans to the Panthers' ranks, however, hindered the effectiveness of the party's programs. It alienated more conservative and influential sectors of the African American community and left the group open to negative publicity in the mainstream press. Moreover, the Panthers' programs presented a political threat to Mayor Richard J. Daley, who perceived the party's service projects as an attempt to preempt the authority of City Hall. The party's militant image also prompted federal and local authorities to raid Panther property on 3 separate occasions in 1969, ostensibly to look for fugitives and illegal weapons. The final raid on the morning of December 4th crippled the organization and claimed the lives of Illinois Chapter Deputy Chairman Fred Hampton and Panther Mark Clark. Without effective leadership and a broad base of community support, the Chicago Black Panther Party could not weather the internal differences that eventually sapped the group's remaining resources in 1973. The FBI sabotaged the party with an illegal and covert counterintelligence program, COINTELPRO, of surveillance, infiltration, perjury, and police harassment, all designed to undermine and criminalize the party. Black Hawk, born Makataimishi Kiakiak, Sauk, Makatewe Meshi Kekekwa, c. 1767, October 3, 1838, was a Sauk leader and warrior who lived in what is now the Midwestern United States. Although he had inherited an important historic sacred bundle from his father, he was not a hereditary civil chief. Black Hawk earned his status as a war chief or captain by his actions, leading raiding and war parties as a young man and then a band of Sauk warriors during the Black Hawk War of 1832. During the War of 1812, Black Hawk fought on the side of the British against the U.S. in the hope of pushing white American settlers away from Sauk territory. Later, he led a band of Sauk and Fox warriors, known as the British Band, against white settlers in Illinois and present-day Wisconsin during the 1832 Black Hawk War. After the war, he was captured by U.S. forces and taken to the eastern U.S., where he and other war leaders were taken on a tour of several cities. Chief Justice Noble Drew Ali, Prophet of Islam, founded the Moorish American Science Temple in Chicago. The FBI investigated the Moorish Science Temple. Noble Drew Ali, Prophet of Islam, founded the Moorish American Science Temple in Chicago. In the 1920s, this temple was a center for African American ethnic pride and political activism. Most African Americans, Ali contended, are actually of Moorish descent. African Americans, eager to hear his eclectic mix of Orthodox Islam, Christian revivalism, and black separatism, the writings of Marcus Garvey, and Ali's own brand of zealous racial pride, often misinterpreted his message and reacted with street brawls and threats against other individuals. Ali issued a decree ordering a complete cessation of violence. In 1929, he was arrested for the murder of a political rival. He was released but died under mysterious circumstances a few weeks later. The FBI investigated the Moorish Science Temple for its alleged hostility toward capitalism and its efforts to incite revolution. This collection is organized into geographic sections demarcating FBI headquarters and various field offices, including Baltimore, Chicago, and Philadelphia. It is filed chronologically within the geographic sections. Materials contain correspondence, memos, reports, interviews, and pamphlets. Scholarly Resources Description. Chief Fredrick Allen Hampton Sr., August 30, 1948, December 4, 1969, was an American activist and revolutionary socialist. He came to prominence in his late teens and early 20s in Chicago as deputy chairman of the National Black Panther Party and chair of the Illinois chapter. He founded the anti-racist, anti-classist Rainbow Coalition, a prominent multicultural political organization that initially included the Black Panthers, Young Patriots, which organized poor whites, and the Young Lords, which organized Puerto Ricans, and an alliance among major Chicago street gangs to help them end infighting and work for social change. As a Marxist-Leninist, 78 Hampton considered fascism the greatest threat, saying, "Nothing is more important than stopping fascism, because fascism will stop us all." In 1967, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, identified Hampton as a radical threat. It tried to subvert his activities in Chicago, sowing disinformation among black progressive groups and placing a counterintelligence operative in the local Panthers organization. In December 1969, Hampton was drugged, then shot and killed in his bed during a pre-dawn raid at his Chicago apartment by a tactical unit of the Cook County State's Attorney's Office, who received aid from the Chicago Police Department and the FBI leading up to the attack. Law enforcement sprayed more than 100 gunshots throughout the apartment. The occupants fired once. During the raid, Panther Mark Clark was also killed, and several others were seriously wounded. In January 1970, the Cook County coroner held an inquest. The coroner's jury concluded that Hampton's and Clark's deaths were justifiable homicides. Chief Larry Hoover is a notorious figure in Chicago, known as the co-founder of the Gangster Disciples street gang, and has been incarcerated for decades, serving multiple life sentences. Here's a more detailed look at Larry Hoover. Gangster Disciples founder. Larry Hoover is widely recognized as one of the co-founders of the Gangster Disciples, a major street gang in Chicago. Incarceration. Hoover has been serving multiple life sentences for his involvement with the Gangster Disciples, including a federal sentence for continuing to run the gang from prison. Recent court appearances. He has recently made rare public appearances via video conference, seeking to qualify for an early release program. Popular culture. Hoover has been referenced in music by artists like Rick Ross and Killer Mike, and even appeared via phone on skits for the Ghetto Boys album, The Resurrection. Sentencing reforms. Hoover's case has drawn attention to sentencing reforms, with some arguing that he should be resentenced based on the First Step Act. Free Larry Hoover movement. There has been a movement to free Larry Hoover, with some calling for his pardon and prison reform.